Welcome to New York Nonprofit Media. My name is Jeff Stein, and I'm here in the CEO corner with Christine Quinn, who is the Executive Director of WIN, formerly the Speaker of the City Council here in New York City and mayoral candidate in 2013. We're just so happy that you're here to share your expertise and to talk about a topic that a lot of us are thinking about right now, homeless and homeless services.
Well, 4 months in as CEO, I hope I have enough to say, so I might have to come back for a bigger part of the corner in the future.
Well, I'm sure that you'll have a lot to offer in terms of WIN's programming that's going on right now. You know, I think a lot of people are wondering what the city should do to increase its oversight of homeless services, what the state should do to increase its oversight. But there are so many great organizations like WIN who have been in this business for a long time and really know what works and what doesn't. You know, what aspects of WIN's programming would you like to highlight to government agencies?
Well, first, let me just say on the issue of oversight. Look, there's no question that groups like mine, who provide such an incredible service to the city and state, we should have oversight, and we should have inspections to make sure we're delivering really good services for folks in need. But what we need to do, and the real opportunity in this moment where everyone is focused, right, is to get the oversight coordinated. Right now, shelters that are run by WIN and other nonprofits, we're inspected by, depending on the type of population you have, anywhere from 6 to 8 city agencies and a state agency. Right. Every time those inspectors come, you are disrupted from your work, they don't come together, and the state rules conflict with the city rules, and some city department rules conflict with other city department rules. So we need to get one set of rules and coordinated, consolidated inspections. That way, you have a clear standard and no one can really wiggle out around it. Now, one of the things, and you need that because if the physical space isn't safe and respectful and dignified, you cannot expect people to really dig down into themselves and pull out a higher level of strength in a terrible moment if you're not giving them the respect they deserve and their families deserve by having a safe, clean, uplifting place for them to be. Now, at WIN, one of the things we really believe is that shelters are not, as my father might have said, 3 hots and a cot. They're much more than that. They're a place where people don't want to be, but when they are there, we need to seize that moment to get them the support they need to break the cycle of homelessness, in the case of WIN, for them and their children. What does that mean? It means holistic services that we call the way to WIN, which could include substance abuse work, mental health, job training, income building around job training if you already have a job, child care, after school, educational programs, and that sounds like a lot. Not every client needs every bit of that. Some do. But what we also believe at WIN is that every client has to have an individualized program. And they work with our caseworkers in intake, and intake isn't a half an hour, it can be a 2-week process actually, where we come up with their initial plan, where they agree to it, where we articulate goals, and then we work together to meet those goals. But look, think about the first time anybody who's watching this might have gone to a therapist. You don't walk into the therapist and go, here's everything that ever happened in my life and this is why I hate my parents and every terrible thing that ever happened. No, it takes time to build a relationship. That's the same thing with a homeless family when they're in a shelter. So what we may believe is critical for that family in the first 30 days may change as we unpeel the layers of the onion and get to other issues. Like we have a family now, they've been with us for a number of months, and they just built up the trust to tell us that one of their daughters had been sexually abused by 2 different men in the family. Now, that really raises the likelihood that the other girls have been also. That's a whole nother set of issues that we need to deal with that family. But if you don't, and people may hear that and say, well, geez, that's an awful lot. It is an awful lot. But these are New Yorkers in need, and if we don't deal with these issues, we won't break the cycle, and folks will end up back in shelter, and that's worse on every level. You know, another thing that I think is really important right now is for us to make sure that when we're talking about homelessness, we're absolutely recognizing the needs of the single homeless folks and the mentally ill single homeless folks, but also what I call the forgotten face of homelessness, which is families. 80% of the people in shelter, 80% are families. 20% of the people in shelter are under 5 years of age. But absolutely singles need help. But almost all of the discussion, almost all of the debate is around that population, which is not the majority. And I think much of the media, or some of the media, have focused on that population not to bring us together, but to have an us-them debate, which is much harder to have when you're looking in the face of a 4-year-old. And it matters because of that us-them, because of pulling us apart. It also matters because we want to make sure we're developing programs that have services for children. You know, at Winn, this is President's Week, right? Schools aren't in. We have a camp all summer long and every school break. So children who are out of childcare age, who aren't in school this week, are in Camp Winn. Camp Winn is based on a STEM curriculum. It's also fun. They got to go to Prospect Park yesterday, some of them, and go ice skating. There's different fun activities. If you don't have that, what's a homeless child going to do when they're not in school? They may just sit in their room or their unit all day. That's not what those children need. So if you don't recognize who is in the system, you won't design services that help them. And obviously being a homeless child raises your likelihood of being a homeless adult, which we want to prevent. Another thing I think New Yorkers don't realize about the homeless is how many of them nowadays are working. 43% of the moms at Winn, and 95% of our heads of household are women. We take men, but the nature of poverty is it's single moms. 43% are working, but weren't making enough money to keep paying the rent, child care, food, whatever else they needed. That's startling, I think, to most New Yorkers. But we need to know that, we need to respect that, and I would argue, and we're trying to get this done, so if anyone has $2.5 million, we'll take it, because that's what a really good program would cost, at Winn, to put a real job training program in each one of our 11 shelters that had GED in the shelters, you know, had high school equivalency in the shelters, that had the classes to get a security guard certificate, a commercial driver's license, a home health aide licenses, whatever you need, and then we can connect folks to the jobs. The good news is, in the 4 months I've been at Winn, I have heard from so many corporate leaders, union leaders, and nonprofit leaders who want to help Winn's moms get better jobs and get jobs. And I think we really can do that. We just need to put this kind of a program together that's focused on it, because the caseworkers are already doing so much around life skills, housing, children's issues, etc.
How much of the solution do you think is increased funding, you know, on the government level, like from the state level, increasing the FEPS rental subsidy, those, you know, those sorts of big ticket items that I know Mayor de Blasio recently pushed for when he went up to testify in front of the Assembly. You know, do you think that that is sort of the difference in a single mother being able to stay in her home and not needing the services of Winn? And, you know, are there other state level spending ticket items that, you know, you'd like to focus on?
Well, look, I think more money at the city, state, and federal level is enormously helpful. Now, money needs to be spent right, and you need to make sure that cumbersome and unnecessary, you know, regulatory burdens like the you know, and contradictory inspections get taken away. But that would be really helpful. And it's important for people to know that the shelter rate, like how much, say, Winn as a provider gets per unit or things like that, or how much we get for rent when we rent an apartment for help someone rent an apartment when they leave shelter, that really hasn't increased, in some cases, in decades. And curiously, at Winn, shelters we opened a long time ago get a certain amount. Shelters we opened more recently get a higher amount per room. So in a weird way, the longer term you are out there as a provider, you could very well be getting penalized because the rate years ago was less than it is now. So for folks who think, well, aren't we just throwing money at the problem? The truth is we have not thrown money at this problem in decades. And rents have gone up, land costs have gone up. You know, everything that relates to these kind of services has gone up, and we have not really been able to keep up. And so it is really important that money is put in place. And you know, all of this needs to exist in the 2016 reality of that rents are really expensive in New York. And so if we're going to work on finding folks homes and they use their vouchers to pay the rent, or putting folks in housing with services where we're going to work with them to rent apartments, you need to have vehicles where you have enough money to pay the rent. And that can be a real challenge. I mean, we have a program we do with the federal government, HUD, around renting apartments for folks where we then provide supportive services to them. The money HUD gives us is not enough to find an apartment that is decent anywhere, really anywhere. And you end up, you know, one of those apartments, we were banging on the boiler door on Friday night because the guy had the heat set on summer setting. We all remember how cold it was on Friday night. These are not the kind of apartments you want to rent for people. That is in part because there are bad people out there, but that is in part because we don't have enough money to go for places that aren't dumps.
Moving to another issue that I know is very much on your radar and on the radar of pretty much everyone in the human services sector is the minimum wage. I know that you did a lot of advocacy around this when you were an advisor to Governor Cuomo on the steps of City Hall, the Fight for 15 movement. Are you kind of concerned for the human services sector? And I know a lot of people are worried that they haven't heard any language from him about how his administration would fund an increased wage for the human services sector. And I know that there's been a lot of advocacy around that. Do you think that there's that we're running the risk that this sector could fall through the cracks?
Well, look, it's all a team effort, right? So I think it's great that Mayor de Blasio came forward and said that city contracts would be $15 an hour. That's for Winn, we're about a $70 million organization. To get all of our employees to $15 an hour would have been an additional $500,000. Most of our contracts right now are city contracts, and we'll make up the difference. It's not usually significant. So that was a big step for us when the mayor took that step forward, and I think we're very grateful. That said, there's been no one really in the state who's been a stronger advocate for the minimum wage than Governor Cuomo. And he has been challenged in his ability to kind of do a full blanket $15 minimum wage increase by the Republicans in the Senate. I mean, I think, you know, that's super clear. And he's found, as we saw with fast food workers and home health workers and others, super creative ways to get it done. And I have no doubt that he will include every sector, including our sector, in the work that he does. He just needs to time it out right with all the various battles that are going on with the Republicans and others in Albany. But I have full faith that he understands the significance of this for working people. And I also have full faith that given his history around serving the homeless and his focus on homelessness now, he knows that the working poor are, in fact, unfortunately, the homeless. And that if we want to help them get housed into permanent housing and break that cycle of homeless, part of that is $15 for the homeless and for those who serve them, because you don't want them to become one and the same. So I have a lot of confidence that when it's all said and done in this session, we'll see that having been taken care of for the human services sector.
Cool. Well, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you a political question that we have you here.
I might be remiss if I answer it, but we'll see what happens.
So we saw in Vogue magazine today, Hillary Clinton invoked your name, talking about a lot of the issues that have been raised in her campaign right now about being, you know, a female leader in the public sphere, and you know, saying that maybe you were treated unfairly in your mayoral run. Do you think that some of those same issues are percolating up again in Hillary Clinton's campaign, and you know, what do you think will come of it?
Well, you know, look, I was just stunned by the word brash. Who would ever call me brash? I don't know, like where Jonathan Van Meter, the author, possibly got that. It's crazy. You know, look, I think Secretary Clinton, just like I would say, you know, it's tough to run for office, and you only have your own experiences, right? Which for me and her is as women. But I couldn't be. She's so lovely and so kind, as it was clear in that very article, and she's always been exceedingly maternal. When I lost the mayor's race, the first telephone call that was on my phone was hers. And you know, as you can imagine, when you don't have something you want to succeed, work out, you're not like immediately calling people back. And her assistant was calling and calling and calling. It was not going to get past like 10:30 in the morning before I called Secretary Clinton back, and she got to hear that I was hanging in there. So she is a lovely, lovely person with a deep sense of support to other people, but particularly a deep sense of support of how challenging things can be for women in professional life and politics, and I've heard it from people in other careers too, and that's one of the reasons why she is going to be a great president, because she's going to bring all of those experiences where things were made harder than they needed to be, where things were difficult for her and other people because of who they are. She's going to bring that experience into the Oval Office, and just as it has with President Obama, it's going to change people's lives.
Great. Well, thanks so much for
Thank
being
you.
here and talking about Wynn, and also about the political flavor of the day.
Thank you. Thank you.